All right, this video is going to be, well, I hope much shorter because it's really a follow-on to what we've already talked about. So last week's was all of Section 18, Section 20, and the dolphins and the tuna. Now we're just going to look at a couple of specific scenarios. And so I probably will not make too many notes here. That's not an indication of a complete shift in these videos. It just, for this one, I don't think there'll be too many that are necessary. So basically we want to look at two specific things today, and then in the problem that we're going to do, we're going to introduce the difference between being employed and running a business. But first, let's look at home office expenses. So home office expenses are a bit tricky. Because definitely the cost of your office space is deductible. You incur it to earn business income. That's somewhat irrefutable. The difficulty arises when that space is in a personal space, your home. And so the way that the Act deals with this is it basically says this: you can treat that thing as your office. So basically treat it as if it is not in your home if one of two. So it's very important to note this is an or condition, not an and. So if the home office is your principal place of business, and basically what this comes down to usually is there someone else that you do spend more of your time. So if someone else has rented office space available for you, you're going to have a hard time justifying that your home office is the principal place of business. The second one, though, is that it's used exclusively and regularly for meeting with customers. And so this could be the case where you could have other space, but you could say, I still need this space in my home, and it is reserved for, so, we don't use it for our personal space. It is a home office. If you meet either one of those, then you're in and you can deduct. Now, how much can you deduct? Well, this is tricky, right? Because a house has lots and lots of expenses in order for you to own it. And so what the Act ends up doing is saying, okay, well, obviously you're not going to set up a separate utility bill just for that office, et cetera, et cetera. So we will let you prorate the total. So whatever you spend on your house, just take a portion of that. And what that ends up being is usually square footage. So the square footage of the office divided by the usable square footage in the house, and that times your total costs that are allowed to be deducted is what you can deduct. Now, we need to note here that well, we'll see it later, but the amounts or the types are limited. So you can't, just because you spend $1 on your house does not mean it can be added to the total home office expense. So we'll take a look at that. Also important to note that if you spend money on the house that has nothing to do with the home office, so if you renovate your kitchen, those costs can't go in. It has to be a shared expense of the home office. Okay, and then the last thing is they put a cap. So this is basically, this is not a limiting because you're a rich person cap. This is a limiting to make sure that we don't have people creating losses in businesses using their home office. So basically what it says is we'll let you deduct your home office expenses per what we've just told you how to calculate them. But if the business is then in loss as a result of taking home office expenses, your home office expense is capped. So you can basically take up deduct until you reach zero income. Okay, so that's the nature of that. Now, if you have those expenses, can be carried forward to the next year and used when you have more income to use them. Okay, but you can't create a loss that then would be carried back to recover old tax. Okay, so that's home office expenses. Automobile expenses. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about cars because cars are complicated. Because one, they're so much part of what we do. They're so much part of business, and they're often used. They're often provided. They're often needed to generate income, and they're often provided. And so we will look at these both from the expense side and from the benefit side. So today we're only looking at the expense side, and there's not a whole lot that's confusing here. The cost of using a car, I think, are I would hope fairly obvious. You spend money on keeping it on the road, you spend money on financing it if you've needed to borrow to buy it, and you lose economic value in it. It loses value with time, so depreciation run through the CCA system. Okay, if you lease a car, your operating costs are exactly the same, but your out-of-pocket cost is no longer realized sort of through the loss of economic value. You're actually paying monthly or whatever your terms are for the use of that car. Okay, so in the case of the lease, it's somewhat simpler in that the costs are just very easily identifiable in the cash that goes out. And again, just like with the home office, basically we need to come up with a way to say, okay, now clearly a car could be used if a car is owned by businesses and the purpose of it was to be used to generate income. You know, if someone needs to run to the corner store to pick up milk for their baby, they can do that, but that is not a business expense. And so what we do is we basically do another proration and say business kilometers over total kilometers equals the portion of your total costs that you can deduct. Okay. Now, as we've met already, so we met this the first cap. Let me change to red. It might be better. We've met this first cap, right? This is class 10.1 that we met before. And we introduced the reasons for that cap being there. So there are basically analogous caps on your interest and on your lease payments that basically say if you're going to go out and get a really, really expensive car, we're going to put a cap on the amount that we will let you deduct, the amount that the rest of the country will chip in on these costs. Okay, and so there are the numbers. We have to also remember that there's this HST or GST effect that differs. If the HST or GST is a cost to you, then absolutely that will increase these caps. If it's not a cost to you, then it will not affect the caps. Okay, so there's those two. Now, when we get to classes 17 and 18, we're going to spend a fair bit of time figuring out what is the difference between a self-employed person and an employed person. But it's important to note here, and we introduce it kind of as almost a teaser to, because problem 413 basically says, let's look at this person as if they're running a business, and then let's look at them as if they're employed. And what we realize, so first of all, those two things are supposed to be completely separate. So business and employment are, put on two sides of a divide by the definition of the word business. But when it comes right down to it, they're not that different. And so you think about this, does an employee need to spend money to earn their employment income? The answer is yes, absolutely, they do. But the act, is generally not deductible against employment income. Generally not deductible. Okay, so basically what we're doing is we're saying these things are different. If you incur $1, so you drive miles in a car or you buy an airplane ticket to go to an interview, we're not going to let you deduct that from your employment income. And once you're employed, when you own that car and you have to get to work, or you eat lunch when you're there, or you buy special clothes that you would never have bought otherwise because you work there, those are not deductible from your employment income. That's inconsistent with what we've learned about what is deductible. In the business realm, you can deduct it if it was incurred to earn income. Okay, so there's an inconsistency there. Not only that, in the world that we're in right now, there are a lot of people who are what we call contractors or self-employed people, and there are a lot of people within the same, sitting cubicles side by side. One of them is an employee, and one of them is self-employed. And so one of those people may be deducting the cost of getting to work every day, and the other person is not. The employee is not. Okay, so we're going to take a look at how this all works, and we'll defer any detail on this, but we're kind of back in that realm of reasonable expectation of profit and income versus capital, where we're in case law, where it is not, there's no litmus test to say that person's employed and that person is self-employed. We're going to need to figure out based on the case facts, are they or aren't they? Most times it's not that controversial, but Sometimes it is. Okay, so looking at the deductions that people can take. Now, I may need to blow this up a little bit because I don't think you can see that at all. So the deductions, you probably still can't read it, but this is straight from your textbook. Why does it matter if you're employed or self-employed? Well, it matters for lots of other reasons, but on the deduction side, it matters because employees are more restricted. And so the problem that we're going to look at in class is basically going to bring this home. The proprietor, this is the business. So biz, I'll shorten. Look, they can deduct everything. As long as it's incurred to earn business income, they can deduct everything. The employee, if you notice, on the home office, these are specifically missing, specifically excluded costs that have left their pocket. Why have they left their pocket? So that they could earn employment income, and they cannot deduct them. And then we have in the middle what I'm calling this kind of hybrid, where these people have commission income, and we'll talk about them in class and why they're different. Okay, so for now we'll leave them, compare this column and this column to get the sense of what we're trying to get at. Okay, so there's differences. It matters. The Act under a different section, Section 8, restricts the deductions that an employee can take. Okay, and we are going to get more into this after the second midterm, so please don't, this isn't complete treatment. So just a quick look. What can employees deduct? Well, employees can deduct anything that they're required to spend as long as it's not specifically excluded. But the number of things that you're required to spend, it needs to be literally the business says you are incurring this on behalf of the business. So you could say, well, I'm required to get to work. Surely that qualifies. And the answer is no, it doesn't. Yes, you have to get to work, but your work is your principal place of business. And getting to and from your personal place of business is personal time. I'm not saying it rings completely of fairness, but these are the rules. Okay? So it has to be required, and then if it is required, then basically we're talking about travel expenses, motor vehicle expenses, and that's about it, right? There isn't a whole lot else that you can deduct that you're required to deduct. These dues, but these kind of come in, are small. And then on motor vehicles, or if in maybe the odd time you would have an aircraft involved, but motor vehicles, we will let you deduct interest and CCA if you're an employee and your car is required. Okay, so the way we look at this is the salesperson can deduct more. If you look at this, not limited to the type of expenditure for the salesperson. Okay, so that's a big deal. But you can only deduct up to the amount of your commissions. So again, it's almost like you can't create a loss with these. So the salesperson basically has this option. Do you want to choose this? The employee who's not a commissioned salesperson is locked right here. Okay, they don't have access to F. And so they just deduct whatever they can under H and H.1 and then under I and J. But it's much more limited, as we will see in the question that we're going to look at in class 413. All right, thanks.